If you think horror films don't create stars, think again. From unknowns turned cult icons to well-known actors whose signature roles came in fright flicks, here are some of the household names that horror made famous. If you were a moviegoer in the 1950s, you probably saw plenty of Anthony Perkins pictures. At the time, Perkins was best known as Gary Cooper's kid in Friendly Persuasion, for which he received his sole Oscar nomination, and as baseball player Jim Pearsall in Fear Strikes Out. However, Perkins' icon status came from his most famous role, Norman Bates in Psycho.
Thank you, Mr. Bates.
Norman Bates.
Alfred Hitchcock had a stroke of genius when he cast Perkins as Bates. Nobody else in 1960 would have envisioned the boyishly good-looking Perkins as a crazed killer. And if you're thinking it sounds like Perkins was already a star, not exactly. He was a well-respected supporting actor in an era when Hollywood had a clear hierarchy. Psycho made Perkins Norman Bates, cinema's first slasher villain, and the inspiration for characters from Michael Myers to Hannibal Lecter. Warner Brothers gave William Peter Blatty's novel The Exorcist the A-list treatment in the 1970s. It had a big budget for the time, $12 million, and starred Hollywood star Ellen Burstyn and Swedish superstar Max von Sydow. However, the most important piece was the little girl Reagan, who would be possessed by the demon Pazuzu. Director William Friedkin cast 13-year-old Linda Blair from among hundreds of applicants. Blair had only been in 2 movies by that point, but her performance as the head-spinning, pea-soup-spitting Reagan in The Exorcist scored her a Supporting Actress Oscar nomination and cinematic icon status. After The Exorcist, Blair's career took off. She appeared in a string of popular made-for-TV movies as well as the big-budget hit Airport in 1975. Ironically, it was her return to Reagan that killed her budding career, as Exorcist II: The Heretic was a critical and commercial bust. While Blair did manage to navigate the tricky path from child star to a grown-up movie star, she's still a household name, especially among horror fans. With Jaws, Universal put a lot of responsibility on Steven Spielberg's 27-year-old shoulders. The studio gave him $12 million and a ticket to Martha's Vineyard and said, "Go make a movie." Spielberg cast Oscar-nominated supporting actor Roy Scheider as Chief Brody and Robert Shaw as shark hunter Captain Quinn. For Hooper, the wise-ass shark expert from the big city, Spielberg cast Richard Dreyfuss, best known for George Lucas's 1973 hit American Graffiti.
I said, I want Richard Dreyfuss to play Matt Hooper. I don't want you playing a dilettante, I want the dilettante in you.
Post-Jaws, Dreyfuss's career soared with starring roles in Close Encounters of the Third Kind and The Goodbye Girl, for which he won a Best Actor Oscar. But while Jaws made Dreyfuss a movie star, the real superstar to emerge from the film was Spielberg, who became the highest-grossing director ever. The first slasher scream queen was Janet Leigh in 1960's Psycho. Alas, Leigh's character took a fateful shower and didn't survive. 17 years later, Leigh's daughter became a different kind of scream queen, the final girl in 1978's Halloween. Jamie Lee Curtis's Laurie Strode is arguably the most famous final girl in the horror genre and the most bankable character in the franchise.
All right, Annie. First I get your famous chewing, now I get your famous squealing.
While Halloween is most associated with Michael Myers, the entries starring Curtis are by far the biggest blockbusters. In fact, the only Halloween movie without Curtis to even break $50 million worldwide was Rob Zombie's 2007 remake. After playing Laurie Strode, Curtis was a movie star and a forever horror fan. She followed up Halloween with The Fog, Prom Night, Terror Train, and Halloween 2, before moving on to less bloody roles throughout the 1980s and 1990s. But you just can't say no to legacy roles, or the paychecks, so Curtis keeps on returning to the role that first made her a star. To say Sigourney Weaver came from nowhere in 1979's Alien is an understatement. While she was a well-regarded stage actress, moviegoers probably only knew about her as Woody Allen's tall date in Annie Hall. In the Alien franchise, she created one of the top 10 greatest movie heroes of all time, according to the American Film Institute. It all started in Ridley Scott's sci-fi screamer Alien. As Lieutenant Ellen Ripley, Weaver emerged as the sole survivor of the USCSS Nostromo, following an attack by a xenomorph. She also emerged from the film as a major movie star, landing above the title parts in the prestige drama The Year of Living Dangerously and blockbuster comedy Ghostbusters. In Aliens, Weaver returned to her signature role and even scored an Oscar nomination. You could argue that it was Weaver's return to Ripley that amped her career even more, as she followed up Aliens with career-defining and Oscar-nominated roles in Gorillas in the Mist and Working Girl. However, that would be like saying The Terminator didn't make Arnold Schwarzenegger a star. Terminator 2 did. It was Weaver's debut as Ripley in Alien that established her as a different kind of female lead and a bona fide movie star. David Cronenberg's 1986 The Fly remake created 2 movie stars, Jeff Goldblum and Geena Davis. Before The Fly, Goldblum was best known for supporting roles in The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension and The Big Chill, and lead roles in Into the Night and Transylvania 6-5000. But after The Fly, Jeff Goldblum became, well, Jeff Goldblum, Hollywood's favorite eccentric, a household name with the second most famous stammer in movie history, After Jimmy Stewart, The Fly transformed Goldblum from an actor into a proper noun and a brand unto himself. While you can certainly see shades of Goldblumism before The Fly, Cronenberg's reimagining of the 1958 original forever established his screen persona. Heck, it established his human persona.
I won't be just another tumorous bore talking endlessly about his hair falling out in his last lymph nodes.
However, Goldblum wasn't the only actor to become famous for The Fly. There was also his soon-to-be wife, Geena Davis. Before The Fly, Davis had a bunch of TV credits and a supporting role as a soap opera actress in Tootsie. Her career completely transformed thanks to her heartbreaking, bone-chilling performance. Davis followed up The Fly with career-defining roles in Beetlejuice and The Accidental Tourist, which won her an Academy Award, then the all-time classics Thelma and Louise and A League of Their Own. Goldblum and Davis married soon after The Fly, but filed for divorce 3 years later, though their respective cinematic legacies are still growing today. The tagline for director Gore Verbinski's 2002 horror film, The Ring, was, "Before you die, you see the ring." Thankfully for star Naomi Watts, that was fiction. Watts had played bit parts for a decade before being cast in the lead in David Lynch's 2001 Mulholland Drive. That performance got her noticed, but Mulholland Drive wasn't exactly mainstream. Watts followed it up the next year with The Ring, a remake of the 1998 Japanese horror film Ringu. The Ring grossed $248 million worldwide and has cinematic staying power, based on the think pieces that followed its 20-year anniversary in 2022. Besides Verbinski going on to direct the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, the biggest beneficiary of The Ring was Watts. She followed it up with an Oscar-nominated role in 21 Grams, and starring roles in blockbusters King Kong and The Ring 2. Perhaps most impressive is that she became a deeply respected dramatic actress after starring in a horror flick, a rare feat indeed. If you're a millennial, chances are you have at least one friend who insists Donnie Darko is the greatest movie ever, and will explain why in agonizing detail. Wherever you stand on the Donnie Darko divide, there's no denying it made a star out of Jake Gyllenhaal. In the film, Gyllenhaal plays the troubled teenager Donnie, the kind of guy who could only be the sympathetic hero in a movie like this.
Destruction is a form of creation, so the fact that they burn the money is ironic. They just want to see what happens when they tear the world apart.
Despite being in his late teens during filming, his wise and worldly performance anchors the oftentimes head-scratching film. To be honest, Gyllenhaal deserves more credit than he probably gets for making Donnie Darko digestible. While 1999's October Sky was his first major role, and Donnie Darko bombed in theaters, its success on DVD sent Gyllenhaal's career to the stratosphere. Within just a few years, he was starring in Roland Emmerich's blockbuster disaster pick The Day After Tomorrow, and earned an Oscar nomination in the groundbreaking Brokeback Mountain. Yet Donnie Darko remains Gyllenhaal's defining role. Well, that and being the subject of Taylor Swift's All Too Well. You can't argue Donnie Darko isn't actually a horror movie, but a surreal suburban fantasy. If so, you clearly didn't lose sleep over Frank the Rabbit. But there's no denying that it made Gyllenhaal a movie star. If you don't believe us, just ask your Donnie Darko loving buddy. Obviously, playing Batman in Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy made Christian Bale a movie star. However, playing Patrick Bateman in Mary Harron's American Psycho made him a cult icon, and that alone warrants his inclusion on this list. Based on Bret Easton Ellis's 1991 novel of the same name, American Psycho retains the novel's acerbic tone as it satirizes the excess, superficiality, and materialism of the 1980s.
I can only get these sheets in Santa Fe. These are very expensive sheets and I really need them.
That's largely thanks to Bale, whose performance as Bateman is both funny and terrifying. He goes from making you laugh at his thoughtful dissections of Huey Lewis in the news, to making you cringe at his equally thoughtful dissections of his victims.
I like to dissect girls. Did you know I'm utterly insane?
Everything about Bateman is pretentious. The only pleasure he gets comes from hurting others. Yet the one thing separating Bateman from his finance industry peers is that he kills those he sees as subhuman, rather than just dismissing them as less than. Bale earns early notoriety at the age of 13 by starring in The Empire of the Sun, one of Steven Spielberg's rare bombs. Then starred in Newsies, Disney's failed attempt to revive the big screen musical. Not much of note followed until American Psycho, and although it bombed at the box office, it became an instant cult classic and opened up bigger roles for Bale, until he eventually landed on Christopher Nolan's radar, and the rest is history. Universal probably wasn't expecting much when they handed TV comedian turned writer-director Jordan Peele $5 million to go make Get Out.
Don't mind me, I'm just gonna be over here, y'all do your thing, it's your movie.
They certainly weren't expecting it to take in $252 million worldwide, land a Best Picture nomination, and earn Peele the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. But as surprised as Universal may have been by the film's success, it's likely that the film's star Daniel Kaluuya was downright shocked. Before landing the lead role in Get Out, Kaluuya had supporting roles in Johnny English Reborn, Kick-Ass 2, and Sicario. Get Out was his first starring role, and featured him playing a boyfriend on the worst Meet the Parents weekend ever. In the film, Kaluuya embodied the Black experience, creating a character who felt perpetually unsafe and threatened by the hidden motives of his outwardly genteel white hosts. At the same time, Kaluuya also gave Get Out a gender-swapped final girl that moviegoers worldwide could identify with and root for, no matter their race or background. Get Out was a cinematic experience nobody was expecting, anchored by a performance that made Daniel Kaluuya a star. The 2022 Stepford Wives but make it fashion thriller Don't Worry Darling was the movie that really established Florence Pugh as a star. However, it was the 2019's Wicker Man but Lose the Statue horror movie Midsommar that solidified her star status. Midsommar is about a couple who travels to Sweden to take part in a famed midsummer festival, only to find themselves the unwilling focus of a terrifying pagan ritual. Following Midsommar, Pugh's career could have easily followed the same path as countless other pretty girl and scary movie actresses that came before. It's a testament to her talent and cinematically savvy selections that led Pugh to the A-list instead. She stole the show from acting heavyweights Saoirse Ronan, Emma Watson, and Meryl Streep in Greta Gerwig's Little Women, scoring an Oscar nomination in the process. Then she stole the show again in Black Widow opposite Scarlett Johansson, Rachel Weisz, and David Harbour. By the time she landed the lead in Don't Worry Darling, she was the star. While Pugh demonstrated her acting chops in 2016's Lady Macbeth and 2019's Fighting with My Family, Little Women, and of course Midsommar, made her star status undeniable.